Hello, it's midsummer and today I'm not at Byther Farm, I'm in the garden of Steph Hafferty and I want to introduce her to you and for her to explain what she does in terms of her work, in terms of her play in the summer and in the winter.
When I moved here, the garden was pretty much entirely lawn, weedy lawn, and there were borders which had various kinds of shrubs and trees and other plantings, but essentially it was lawn, and it was this lawn that I've gradually started to make into vegetable beds using no-dig methods. This year, the oaks here have loads and loads and loads of acorns, and last year there weren't any acorns. So I'm hoping that this year the fact that there's this huge abundance of acorns means that the squirrels will eat those and they won't go around the orchard eating all my apples. You might hear a kind of eerie call in the background as I'm speaking, and what it is, it's a red kite. They live in a nearby field and this is part of their hunting ground, and that's the cry they make as they're flying overhead looking for their lunch. June now, and that is a really incredibly busy time, but in the winter time it feels a lot slower, but there's still loads and loads to do. It's just you don't have quite so much time that you can get outside in the day because there's not enough daylight. So the kind of gardening I do in the winter would include a lot of harvesting. There's still plenty that you can eat in the winter. The key thing I feel in the wintertime is to remember to harvest stuff, because if the ground is really frozen and you haven't got your parsnips out and you want them for your dinner, it can be really difficult then getting parsnips. So I need to try and remember to do a weekly harvest rather than every day like I do in the summer. And other jobs, I mulch, I turn the compost if I feel like it. I don't do much compost turning. I order seeds, make plans. There's things that need chipping and shredding, just sort of generally keeping the garden looking healthy through the winter. I really like making plans, and some of them come true, such as the beds in my back garden, where I have a very clear idea of how I wanted this to progress, and other things are a bit fantastical and I plan them and I think about them often when I'm doing a really boring job, because it's great fun, and sometimes from the more extreme unrealistic plans can come ideas for things that I actually can do that maybe I wouldn't have thought of if I was totally thinking about sensible things all the time. So it's really nice. I do, the most unrealistic one at the moment is I have this lovely plan for where I will situate the wood-fired hot tub here in the orchard. Unrealistic because they're quite expensive, but what a lovely thing to think about. I like to think about sitting in that on a cold winter's day, keeping toasty warm in the hot water. Most of the plans I make, though, are things like what new things do I want to grow, what kind of new fruit trees might I want, how could an area be improved, that kind of stuff. I'm really lucky that I do get to spend a lot of time in my garden, which is fantastic. And also it is something I do as a job. I have done this as a job for 14 years now. And when I'm not in my garden or thinking about my garden or planning my garden, the other things that I do, I'm a writer and I write books about gardening and also about what you can do with the things that you grow. I write features for magazines and things, so I'm a freelance writer as well as a book writer, which that takes up quite a bit of time. I have a YouTube channel, which I work on that, and I also give a lot of talks, and I travel around giving talks, which I really love. It's exciting going to different places. Often it's in a city, which I live in a very rural place, so that's always fun. And it's great because I get to meet people. And one of the brilliant things about giving talks is the questions, because some of the questions people ask get you to think about gardening in a way that you hadn't thought about before, which is exciting because no matter how much gardening you do and how experienced you are, there's always so many things still to learn. Next to me here is a little wood store, and this is the wood store for the fire pit here. So some of the wood is just for burning to keep warm, and other things we would use for the barbecue, because we have a little fire pit with a barbecue thing on top. It's one of the several wood stores here in the garden. I've got other ones which we've been splitting logs from some trees here in the garden, which is fuel for the wood burner for the winter. There's oil here. The central heating is oil, and it's pretty crucial in a rural environment to have a wood burner or some other way of heating a house, especially in a place as damp as Wales. I'm hoping that by the end of year 2 here in my home, I will be producing about 80% of the food that we eat. That isn't just fresh food, that would also include food that I've harvested and preserved. Last year I didn't produce, I produced maybe 40-50%. I just moved here. When you move to a new garden, there's a lot of slugs and other pests, and I lost quite a lot. I also was, in a new place. There were so many other things to do that I didn't do much preserving because there's only so many hours in the day and I wouldn't have the time. So it's like, I will buy tinned tomatoes. I'm not going to worry about bottling them. Also, I didn't have a polytunnel, so I didn't have many tomatoes anyway. I'm hoping I will be producing about 80% of our food. I'll need to buy things like rice and pasta, bread obviously, coffee, but that's what my goal is. It's a nice ambition to have. One thing people comment on is the fact that I weed my beds and I weed out dandelions. And it isn't because I'm like death to all dandelions, but even though they are a food source for people, they're not as delicious as parsnips or potatoes or carrots or radicchio, and there's only a certain amount of space here, so I want to produce as much food as I can. I do let dandelions grow in the wild areas, they can grow in the lawn. I'm happy for them growing in the gravelly bit where we park the cars. Absolutely fine. They're a great food source for bees. They're not the only food source for bees. I have a lot of other flowers here at that time of year. They're also, I do use them sometimes in salads, or I use the flowers to make preserves. I don't bother trying to roast the roots because I tried that once and it was, I don't know what I did, but it was horrible. But it can be really tricky because if you do weeding, people are, oh my goodness me, you've now killed off all the food source for the bees. But that little bit of garden is not the entire plot. And it's important to look at the bigger picture and think, I can grow lots of food on a budget and feed my family, which is why I'm growing vegetables. I'm not growing them to photograph and put on Instagram. But you can do that and also support wildlife by having wildlife areas with the dandelions there. Here I do almost everything by myself. I do have the odd bit of help from one of my children. So I have 3 children in their 20s. So if anybody is around at the time I'm doing something and I need an extra pair of hands, sometimes I can grab them. But mostly it's been done by me on my own. So I'm showing what can be done by one person.
I'm so pleased that I've been able to visit Steph today. If you want to find out a little bit more about her work in terms of her writing and stuff, or you want to see some of her videos, please head over to her channel. I'll leave a link on the screen, and if you click on that, it'll take you straight through to her video.